thank you for letting me interview you, Grandpa. I wanted to do this because one time I was over to your house and we were visiting, and you just started talking and you had so many stories to tell about your first jobs and all the places you'd lived, and it made me really start to wonder about all the other stories that you have to tell. So
I've been through the mill.
yes, you have. So I decided to put together some questions that I'd like to have you answer today, okay?
Maybe you'd like to know first how old I am.
How old are you?
Well, I'll be 96, God willing, June 4th. And that's only a couple of weeks ago, I think.
Yes, it is.
I think that's it.
And I hear we're having a little event that Saturday to celebrate you.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice.
Yes.
Always good to have a get-together. We like to have reasons for a get-together. We try to get a lot of reasons. A lot of good get-togethers.
Yep. So would you like to jump right into the questions? Okay. The first question I have for you is, what is your earliest memory?
Earliest memory? Well, that goes back a ways. I remember, it's hard to believe, but when I lived in Newcastle, and I was little, well, I was pretty small, and we moved from a city up to in the country. Now, when we were living in the country, we didn't live too far from my grandparents, my mother's folks, and we could walk 5 minutes on a path through a field and go to their place. But I remember that one time my grandmother came to visit us, and that I remember crying when she left. When she was leaving, I wanted to go home with her. I remember that. You know, that's just like a kid, a baby, a child, a real small child. And
do you know how old you were then?
Oh no, I wouldn't know. No way. But I know it must have been pretty small, because I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, she picked me up. She took me home that day. But I can't remember anymore. But I remember going out on the porch, crying, and I wanted to go home with her.
So you were
I'm
very...
pretty sure she took me home with her. But it just seems like she picked me up, but I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
You were very influential from a very early age.
That goes back a long way.
Yeah.
I don't say that very much because it does go back. You know. Yeah. But I remember one other time that I was real small. My grandma had a child after I'd had. Well, she had two. Uncle Louis, he's 4 months younger than I am, and they had another baby after that. When my Uncle Louis and I were walking around, I remember the funeral we had for that. They had for that baby. I remember my grandmother crying about. They had at that time. They had the body. The baby was in the house. In there, I remember in the bedroom. They used to have a bedroom there, and that's where they had everything else. Mm. That's going back a ways.
Tell me what your parents were like.
Oh, they were a nice couple. They were very, very nice. They had. You got to remember, I was the oldest of 8, and bringing up 8 children was really rough at those days. Things were very hard, and I went as far as, my father didn't have much of he didn't have any education. He worked labor work when he came to the United States. He worked labor work and Well, he was a baker first, in the bakery shop. They made where they made Italian bread, and then he worked in the waterworks for the Newcastle Waterworks. He worked hard there as a labor man until Depression, and he got laid off. He was on. He was about 51 then, I think, and I think I was about 18, 19 years old, 20, and he was working on the Works Progress Administration. I think it's they call it WPA. It was a job that Roosevelt made for poor people, so they work and they could get a check in the family every so often, and they helped keep them going because we didn't have nothing. Didn't have Social Security at that time. No Social Security, so you don't have anything unless you grew it in the garden and you picked it off of trees outside or something like that. So you'd have tough picking. But my father then worked on WPA. It was in March, and he got pneumonia, and he passed away. He didn't. They couldn't stop it. He was home. Doctor come to the house, and the doctor gave him medicine. And I can remember my father sitting up by a little fireplace, and he's shaking, so he had the fever. I can remember that. But the medicine didn't help him. The next day he was worse. And they called the doctor again. He come up and see him, and they sent him to the hospital. But he was only there 2 or 3 days, and he passed off. My mother lived a few years later than that. But it was a hard time for him up to that time. It was Depression time. Yeah. But we made it. I was in the 8th grade. I'm the oldest of 8. I'm in the 8th grade, and I didn't quite finish. I had a job. I was working, and I didn't like school. I didn't like school, so I just quit and worked for these people. And I really got an education from them because later I worked with selling produce and taking orders for produce and selling them, and we had a produce business, and the boss's brother and I, we run that. I learned a lot by doing that, and till I had worked so many hours there that I wanted to get a job working. My ambition was to get a job to work 8 hours a day, and when I found that there was a job available in a Corning Glass Works in Wellsboro, because that's where my first wife was from, Gertrude, and I finally got a job there, and it's a move I ever made. Worked for Corning Glass Works. I worked for them for 32 years. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess I lost track of what the question was. I just kept on going.
It's okay. You've got a lot to tell. What were your brothers and sisters like when you were little?
Oh, I only had one sister.
Okay.
And we, from what I can remember, we got along good. I don't remember any fighting or bickering. We used to make fun of my brother Sam. He's gone now. He passed away. But brother Sam, he was always a lot of fun. joking. Growing up, he was a joker. He'd go outside. At that time, airplanes was a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so an airplane that flew over the house, we thought it was just a great thing. You'd run outside and watch it, you know. And we had two big pear trees out back of the house. And they were tall trees. And I remember him, one time we were having dinner or something, and he heard an airplane. He ran outside, and he come back, oh, put her tipped off put her at the top of the pear tree, you know, bragging about how low the airplane was. Back in those days, it was something to see an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
I saw one. It came down in a field one time, and I thought that was just a great thing. We went over down the road, had to go and see it. I remember that, one of the early airplanes. There wasn't many cars or airplanes, or no airplanes back in those days. We were only a few years old, 8, 10, 12, 14,
Mm-hmm.
by that time.
Who was your first childhood friend?
Well, I went to work starting I bet I was only about 10 years old, and I got a job, and I always worked. And I was working for this greenhouse. He had a greenhouse, 3/5 of an acre under glass, and he raised 2 crops of tomatoes a day, 2 crops of tomatoes a year. And he raised other things too. He'd raise some lettuce in there, and of course a lot of flowers and plants in the springs. And but I remember my Uncle Louis was my closest friend at that time. He was 40 months younger than I am. He's still alive, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, Uncle Louis, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Louis Frank. And he's 4 months younger than I am. That's my mother's brother.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only one left in that family now. But anyhow, I remember him and I together quite a bit. He worked for Ingstrom's too, where I worked, some. He worked there for some too.
When you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I didn't really have any plans to be anything, because I really didn't have a good education. I didn't quite go through it, finish the 8th grade. I was probably almost ready to end of the year in the 8th grade, and I quit. I just quit and worked steady. Then I worked every day, and it was during the Depression, and most of the money went to my mother, and I might get a couple dollars for spending money. That's it. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She wouldn't get very much, maybe $5, $10, $15. Yeah, for a week. Yeah, it wasn't very much.
Do you have a favorite Christmas memory when you were little?
No, I do remember that we used to, when things were going pretty good, I was quite young, we had a lot of what they call paisans and friends. Paisan is a good friend, and paisan would be people that came from the same town in Italy that my father came from. They would be paisans. and they know each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we visited back and forth and see each other too. We used to go and visit quite a bit here and there. The people would come to our place. And I remember Christmas time, they, most of them who had jobs then, they were working. Steel mills in Newcastle were going full blast. In Youngstown, Ohio, full blast. Pittsburgh was all, the things were going good then. That was just before the Depression. And I was younger. And then they would, most of them, knowing that my folks had a large family with children, they would bring, seems to me there used to be 5-pound boxes of candy, chocolates. And we would have a stack of, from what I can remember, it looked like maybe 5 or 6 or maybe more stack under that tree of boxes of chocolate.
Oh my.
Yeah, but another thing they used to bring, they'd bring some oranges and things like that for the family, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And oranges and I don't remember. But that always stuck by me, how the Christmas was. We always had a Christmas tree, something that would be maybe just a branch off of a pine tree. It would be a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't be necessarily a big tree, a real
Mm-hmm.
tree. But we'd get a branch off of a pine tree. I remember doing that. And then decorate it up. Yeah.
What were you like as a teenager?
What was I like as a teenager? I worked hard. As a teenager. I worked real hard. I was, like I say, I worked for this greenhouse ever since I started working, and when I was about 10 years old, and then when I was 16 years old, they started me on driving the truck. I could drive a truck, and when I got good enough, why, I used to drive it a lot, and we was in the wholesale business, selling produce, Dave and I. At that time they didn't have big supermarkets like they do today. You had a lot of little stores around. Since I remember 2 or 3 that had right in their own house, a little store on the side,
Mm-hmm.
in the house built, so where you could go in and buy the different things. And there was a few good sized markets down in Newcastle and like that. I used to take orders. We used to take orders 3 times a week over the telephone, and then go to Youngstown and get the produce. We knew what we could get at that time, all through the summer,
Mm-hmm.
starting right at the spring, right up through the late fall. From all the farmers around Youngstown, in Ohio and Newcastle, Pennsylvania. And the big market was Youngstown. We'd go to Youngstown and get the produce. We'd come home with a load in, take June, July, August. We'd get a lot of vegetables. We had to sell for a lot of stuff. And I remember the hothouse tomatoes was always big because he raised the tomatoes too. He raised 2 crops of hothouse tomatoes. At that time, that was really big. But so I go saying what was I like as a teenager. I worked and didn't have much time to play. I do remember going down on weekends. We had a swimming hole down the river, and But I remember another thing I remember about that is that every time I went, I got a sinus problem, but my nose run all the way home.
Oh, really?
My nose would just run a steady stream. I don't remember what I did for it, but I know what I do for it now. I take vitamin C.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep, you're big on
When
vitamin
my nose
C.
starts to run, I take vitamin C and it helps me.
Mm-hmm.
Then at that time I didn't know. Boy, I used to be a mess. Something caused it when I'd go swimming down there.
Yeah.
And we had girlfriends that would see, they lived across the river
Mm-hmm.
on the other side. They'd come to the swim, would swim back and forth, and we had some fun there, but we weren't bad, none of us. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I remember one thing, the one girl, she's still alive, by the way. I gotta say this. She's still alive. Mary McLean, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. I liked her. She liked me. And I think she was going to come up one time to look me up. And I think that was what I had heard. But I was working. I had to work every other night. I worked late at night, Monday night, Wednesday night, Friday night. I worked at Ingstrom's. I had to work till late at night. I couldn't go nowhere those nights. But anyhow, she started going with a friend of mine, Frank McLean. We went to school together. Well, they got married. They had, I think they had 2 daughters or 3 daughters.
Wow.
I think that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I have